Over the last few weeks, we have been harvesting our garlic. Here in the subtropics, we grow a variety called Glenlarge, which is a subtropical variety, and it takes around 5.5 to 6 months to grow. It's unlike some of the other varieties you get that you may not be seeing harvests until November. So I wanted to share with you guys some of the things that I did wrong this year and the overall harvest of what we've got. So if you saw my video back in March, I did an experiment with a couple of different ways of growing. So I planted quite closely, I planted the regular amount of distance apart, I used a wicking bed, and I used a veg pod. So they all have a vastly different result. So I'm so excited to show you how they all went. First up, the bed that I planted very closely together. It did pretty well considering I planted the cloves around 10 centimeters apart. We have some quite big ones, but we also have some small ones, which I think is more to do with the fact that I let a dill grow in between the rows of garlic. So next year, definitely, I will not be letting anything grow in amongst the garlic because they just compete too much and it does affect the overall results. I'm pretty happy with how well they did overall, but I think I will be opting to go with further apart spacing because of what the results were like for the bed that I planted 15 centimeters apart. So the ones I planted 15 centimeters apart, they were really big, but the one thing that I really noticed with this harvest was that they were consistent in size. So there was no sort of anomalies. They're all very similar sizes. So I think moving forward, I will plant them 15 centimeters apart just to get those bigger heads of garlic. In terms of growing, as they were growing, I did feel like those ones that were spaced further apart were not doing as well, but they really were focusing on that bulb development. I made two mistakes with those big bulbs of garlic. Firstly, I cut off water and stopped feeding them the weekly seaweed extract solution probably a little bit too early, and I do believe that that has affected the overall result. I feel like whilst the bulbs are quite big, there's not many cloves, and I do have an issue where some of them have started to get the bulbous. So to me, see how there's like little, it's almost like the cloves are growing up halfway up the stem. I feel like that's a stress response, so I've probably cut off things a little bit too early. So next year I am definitely going to wait until I see probably a quarter of the leaves drying off before I cut off the regular feeding and watering. So the other mistake I think I made with the big ones was harvesting them a little bit too early. I like to harvest when about half of the leaves have started to dry back, and I was harvesting them because they were falling over and they were still quite green. So I feel like some of the bulbs in the center hadn't quite fully developed yet, and that was probably a result of cutting off that water and feeding a little bit too early. The ones in the veg pod and the wicking bed did quite well. I did plant these ones around 12 centimeters apart, so in between the 10 centimeters and the 15 centimeters. The ones that grew in the wicking beds and the veg pod did pretty well. I think that they work fine in wicking beds. It was really easy for me because I didn't have to water as often. I probably would do wider spacing. So for both of those, I did between 10 and 12 centimeters spacing. And I think as a result of that, I do have a lot of uneven bulbs. Now, after the mistake I made with harvesting too early from the front garden, I made the mistake of harvesting too late from the veg pod. So you can see how I've left these too late, so how they've started the protection of those outer cloves, the paper from the outer cloves, has started to come away. I'm gonna have to eat these ones first. They're not gonna store very well. So that's what happens if you leave them in that little bit too long. They just start separating like this. You can eat them, but you just can't store them long term. So I've got a few of those. A lot of these ones are actually like this. And that's all because I left them in that little bit too late. So from the wicking bed, we got 50. So that's a 1.2 by 1 meter size bed. Varying size, so we've got some quite small ones, but we've also got some okay size ones. The bed that I planted out 15 centimeters apart, they're all quite uniform size. I did harvest them a little bit too early and I cut off nutrients and water a little bit too early. It was a 0.9 by 1.3 garden bed, and we've got 30 from there. So the 90 by 90 bed that we planted 10 centimeters apart, we've got 33 bulbs here. Again, differing in size. There's some pretty decent ones there, to be fair, but there's also some really tiny ones as well. And the medium sized veg pod, which is 1 meter by 1 meter in size, we've got about 42 bulbs. Again, these are quite, a lot of them are actually quite small, but there are some decent ones, but these are the ones that we harvested too late. So I did plant 200 and I've only got around 155, and I know exactly what happened. If you've been following me for a while, you know I've been having issues with those greenhouse cockroaches. Those garden beds out the front, I have the problem with those greenhouse cockroaches, and they seem to cluster all around the edges of the garden bed. So a lot of the bulbs that I had on the outside of the garden beds, they just didn't come up, and I have a feeling that those cockroaches may have eaten them. With the veg pod out the back, we also had issues with one part of the veg pod, which was just getting flattened. So I don't know if that was from some animals running across there at night, but yeah, a lot of those bulbs at the back just didn't come up. So those are a couple of reasons why we're probably missing around 50, but I am pretty happy with overall how many we've got. I'll just need to plant more next year. Now is about curing and storing. So I need to make sure that they all get dried out really, really well so they don't rot before I'm ready to use them and before I'm ready to plant them next March. So as for storing, I bundle up into lots of 10 and I just tie a little string on them, and then I hang them up in a breezy position. So make sure they don't get any direct sunlight on them and they're getting plenty of airflow. If you don't have a breezy position, you might want to set up a fan. It's just for a couple of weeks until all of these stalks are fully dried off. And then what I do is I cut off all of these and just tidy them up. I don't want to take too much of this paper off because it does protect the cloves, but just snipping off the roots and just tidying them up, getting a lot of the dirt off. Do not wash them, they will rot if you do that. So just pull them straight out of the ground, air them out, and then tidy them up before storing them. So you can either braid them for storing or you can just snip them off. Probably, I like to snip them off around about maybe, what's that, 2 centimeters away from the stem, but make sure they're fully dry before you do that. So that's a wrap up of the garlic for 2025. I can't wait to grow again next year. I'm definitely going to do wider spaces, no competition, and keeping an eye on harvest time. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.